the drive. Tatum the finish. It is Banner 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston after a very hectic Celtics week. For the off season, this is the week. This is the one that we've had in our calendars all along. And after Game 7 was on Sunday, hard to believe that was just a couple days ago. The Celtics trade Jrue Holiday on Monday night for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks from the Blazers. And then Tuesday evening, they trade Kristaps Porzingis to the Hawks in exchange for Georges Niang on an expiring deal and a second-round pick. And they basically take care of a lot of their financial issues with that trade, getting below the second apron. So that was kind of how things got kicked off. We go into the draft, which was Wednesday night. First round, Celtics have the 28th pick, which is actually the best pick that Brad Stevens has ever had in a draft. Last year was his first round pick, in which he selected Baylor Sherman. I had my eye on a lot of the bigs in this class: Maxime Reynaud, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Rasheer Fleming. Like, these were the guys that I had been eyeing. But again, I'm not going to pretend to be a draft expert. I think you have to watch these guys all year to be able to be the one to kind of make these decisions. So I was thrown for a little bit of a curveball. Hugo Gonzalez was selected, 19-year-old out of Real Madrid, who I know a lot of Celtics fans were not super excited about because they looked him up and they saw that he averaged like 5 points, 5 minutes per game last season, and he's really not been in the rotation. But after watching some of his film and talking to Brad Stevens and hearing from him and hearing from Mike Zarren about just like what it is that is exciting about this guy, I understand I think his comparison is like a Christian Brown out of Denver. He's a guy that has enormous energy, enormous hustles, a great cutter, great slasher. And I think they view him as a real pro, like a 19-year-old who actually has real, opportunities in this league and real opportunities to be able to actually make an impact. So to me, this is one of those guys who I'm super excited about. Like, I love these high energy guys. I understand there are people who, can you guys hear me? My mic has been so finicky. Oops. Okay, we're going with my computer mic. I apologize if my sound isn't great. But effectively, I think that this is a pick that is hopefully going to help the team down the road and be a real pro for this group. So I'm excited about him. They go into the second round on Thursday night, and there are a couple different options on the board, still some high impact players. Noah Pendo was somebody that I've been looking at. Rasheer Fleming's still available. And then the Phoenix Suns trade up into the first round, and they are able to kind of grab Rasheer Fleming, who reportedly Shams had said that the Celtics were interested in selecting at 32. So that's kind of where they're at. And ultimately, I think that if you look at what they were kind of considering, they end up getting 4 second-round picks in exchange for that selection. So you look at the Celtics, they didn't have anybody that they were extremely excited about at 31. And so at 32, so once Rasheer Fleming's off the board, they trade down, they get the 46th pick and the 57th pick. 2 guys that honestly I knew very little about: Amari Williams, a center out of Kentucky, and then Max Shulga out of VCU, who is just one of those classic sharpshooters, has shot 39% for his career. So those are the 2 guys. I think that there's a lot of things to be interested in as it relates to the fact that they came away with 3 guys. None of them were super big names heading into the draft, and I think initially that disappoints people. Like, I know people like the names that they're familiar with. The guy that I was eyeing was Ryan Kalkbrenner, but it's not like I don't think this guy is going to be like a franchise changer. I mean, we'll see. He went to Charlotte. We'll keep an eye on his career. We'll keep an eye on Rasheer Fleming's career and Noah Pendo, who they drafted and traded to Orlando. So all of those things, kind of a peculiar draft, but I understand from a fan's perspective, it's a little bit of a bummer to see like, okay, none of these names are really flashy. Like, it's been kind of a tough week. You lose 2 players. You don't get anybody exciting back. Obviously, this whole offseason's a little bit like not the most fun for Celtics fans who are seeing, like the championship core be dismantled a little bit and Jason Tatum deal with an Achilles rupture and all of that. So all that to be said, of everything that took place, the number one thing that I found most interesting from this whole week, more than the trades, more than the draft picks, was what Mike Zarren said last night. I asked him specifically about Jaylen Brown and Derek White and those two guys being really on the radar of a lot of opposing teams. Shams from ESPN had said a million times, like literally countless times, he went on TV over the past week and said, teams are calling, the phone lines are ringing. It's going to take a huge offer. They want to hold on to them, but it's going to, teams really want Derek White and Jaylen Brown. And sometimes when you hear those, a guy like him continue to come on TV and continue to say that, you wonder, like, why is that out there? Is that something that the Celtics want out there? Is it something that opposing teams are leaking? Like, why is it continuing to be out there? And I think for me, the number one thing that stood out is Mike Zarren effectively just shot it down. I'll read the exact quote that he said. He said, those two guys are really, really great NBA players, and there hasn't been anything close to serious about trading them. And so I'm not sure where all this reporting came from, but those guys are key parts of our team, and we're lucky to have them here. So I think it doesn't necessarily say that Shams' report was inaccurate, because he never said the Celtics were trying to trade them or they were particularly close. But I do think the frequency with which that came up and the way that it was on TV all the time, it did make me think, okay, maybe we're missing something. Like, maybe this is actually like a big part of what's moving forward. Like, there's a trade that's closed all day draft day. I kept checking my notifications. I was talking to people, trying to see, like, is there going to be a late last minute move here to offload the one of these contracts? So I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure why that was the case. I'm not sure, like, if Hugh just was doing it because it was a big story and, like, everybody's obviously monitoring the Celtics, and that's more interesting than a lot of the, like, less relevant players in the league. Like, if Jaylen Brown gets traded, obviously that's a massive, massive storyline. But after Mike Zarren's answer and just the fact that there was no trade and nothing really close, and Austin Ainge in Utah, like, said that, they were not actually inquiring about Jaylen. That was one of the big teams that was reported on draft day. So sometimes you have to just be careful with these reports, who the sources are, why teams would want them out there. Like, if there's a specific offer out there, most likely, like, the team gave it to a reporter. Like, why would they want that out there, right? Like, usually they wouldn't want that out there. So just something to think about. But that's just a little bit of an overview on the week. I think that overall you can tell that there's a little bit of like a somber feeling, I think, around the franchise right now, because you lost two great players in Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. You didn't get anything back that's really, exciting for fans, but you did achieve your financial goal, which nobody's going to care if you're not a front office member, right? Like, nobody sitting at home being like, oh, I'm so excited that the Celtics met their financial goals, right? Like, that's not how this stuff works. So I'm looking through the questions here. I can go through all of these questions. So feel free to put any questions as it relates to the team in the chat, trades, free agency, all that stuff. Free agency, by the way, Luke Cornett and Al Horford, both unrestricted free agents. Brad Stevens explicitly said that retaining those two guys was a priority. He understood that there's going to be a lot of offers out there and they might want to go elsewhere. There's no pressure, but it is a priority for them. And if you look at the Celtics front court right now, they desperately need bigs. So are they willing to offer either of those guys more than the minimum? I don't know. They're both probably worth more than the minimum, and the Celtics definitely need, even if they're not prioritizing winning next year, they still need a front court. And right now it's Neemias Queta and Xavier Tillman, and that's not going to get it done. So Amari Williams, he's probably going to be on a two-way. He's a nice passing center out of Kentucky. Spent 4 years at Drexel before that. Everything that I've read about him, all the film that I've seen, is passing and rim protection are really his two key things. So I can see that fitting nicely into the Celtics offense, but at the same time, that is not going to, you're not going to be able to slot a guy that you selected 46th and take care of your front court woes ultimately. So we'll know on Monday. Monday is when free agency officially begins. July 6th is when transactions become official, but things can be reported on Monday. So we'll get a better sense Monday at 6 o'clock about either of those guys, Al or Luke. And I have a feeling that we might get positively surprised here if you want them back. I think that the team is leaning towards retaining them both, and I would imagine that both players are probably shopping around, seeing their options. But if I had to guess right now, I think they'll both be back under contract. But that's a guess. We'll see how that shapes out. So starting at the top here, I'm just going to acknowledge this. I've never seen more negativity around an acquisition than George's kneeing. And I would imagine that a lot of it is related to Jaylen Brown, that incident that he had in Game 7 versus the 76ers. And I think in 2023, where he grabbed his leg sitting on the bench, and like Jalen was just like, what is that? I think Jalen posted on Instagram afterwards, but there have been a couple of like skirmishes over the years. The thing that I'll say is that he's an elite shooter. He shot like right under 40% for his career. And if you hate him, that means that he gets underneath opposing team's skin, or at least opposing team's fan base's skin. So there might be something there. Right now, I don't know if they're going to keep him or not. I would imagine that he's not somebody that they're attached to. I don't think they made the Porzingis move because they desperately wanted Yang on their roster. I think it was more that they wanted to offload that money, and that was an expiring contract that was easy to take on. Both of the contracts that they acquired, Anthony Simons and Georges Niang, both expiring. So that's just something to note. So if I had to guess, I don't think we'll see him as a Celtic. Like, I think that he'll probably be packaged in a trade here in the coming days because they still have moves to make. They still have, they're not, they still have to clear a little bit more space if they're going to retain Luke and Al. I think that the roster is a little bit uneven right now. Like, I don't think we've seen the end of their transactions, and that's been reported. And I would imagine Simons and Yang are at the top of the list of guys that they're currently shopping. Tom asks, what did you think of our selections? I like that they acquire 4 picks because ultimately, like, picks are assets that they can kind of use to replenish their chest of assets moving forward. They're probably going to not be great second-round picks because these are Orlando Magic picks, and I think the Magic are going to be good for a long time. So we're probably talking like 50s, and so how valuable are those? I don't know. But they also save a little bit of money because it's more expensive to draft earlier in the round. So I don't know. It was probably a confluence of factors. I don't have too much of an opinion on actual draft selections because ultimately, Kalkbrenner, Reyno, like, these are guys that I did a little bit of research on, but I don't have reason to believe that they would have been franchise changers. After Summer League, I'll have a better sense, and I'll be in Summer League for its entirety. The Celtics have 4 games guaranteed. If they win those, they might make the playoffs, but begins July 11th, 4 games through the 17th. I don't know if Hugo Gonzalez is going to be there. The other 2 guys will be, as well as Baylor Shireman and Jordan Walsh. Drew Peterson, who's a restricted free agent, was a 2-way for the last year and a half. TBD. And by the way, if right now you want some more like chill Celtics content that's not all doom and gloom, we have on the CLNS Media channel interviews with Baylor Shireman, with Torrey Craig, who's also an unrestricted free agent, with Drew Peterson, and with Jordan Walsh. We've done those over the last 2 weeks. So find those on CLNS Media. You can also find, we did a 4.5-hour stream last night through the entirety of the second round. So you can find that whole stream if you want to relive the draft. And also, if you want to hear what Brad Stevens had to say and what Mike Zarren had to say, both of those press conferences are on CLNS Media as well. Ultimately, like, if I were you guys, like, you're going to hear a lot of recaps of what those guys had to say. Just listen to them straight up. It's worth hearing in their tone and their voice. You can make your own assessments about the direction of the team. I know last night, Mike Zarren, John's, when we had our show last night, he concluded that he was kind of admitting like we're tanking next year. I've talked to other reporters who did not take that impression away from that conversation. So I would just suggest you listen to it yourself. You can form your own judgment and get a sense of how you feel about the team and how you feel about kind of the direction that things are headed. Jake here asks, we need more answers on Porzingis, a top 7 big man in the league, mystery illness, and now traded for Niang. I think with Porzingis, here's the reality. He's an elite player when healthy. He was actually very consistent when he was on the floor during the regular season for the 2 years that he was in Boston. Averaged 19.5 points per game on 49% shooting last year, shot above 40% from 3, like really had a good regular season. Total no-show in the playoffs. I don't need to tell you guys that. You guys all remember it. You were there. But ultimately, I think if they are not prioritizing being competitive next year in terms of prioritizing future flexibility, their payroll, those other things, he wasn't going to be a priority. He wasn't a part of the roster moving forward. Like, he's not a long-term core piece. The 4 guys that Brad mentioned, I asked them straight up, like, what can you tell me about the future of this team? I know there's a lot of uncertainty, rebuilding, retooling. He named 4 guys under contract: Tatum, Brown, Pritchard, and White. So those are the 4 guys that I think are part of this future. I don't think they viewed Porzingis as part of this future. Likely, number one, because of his availability concerns. Like, both years in Boston and actually every season of his career, he missed substantial time. Is the illness why he got traded? I think he would have gotten traded anyways. I think they would have gotten better value back had he been healthy. Maybe they extend him on a lower deal, like he takes a team friendly deal. If the illness thing doesn't happen, but he averaged 7 points per game, shot 15% from three. It's hard to know how much of that is just because he was sick, how much of that is other things. At the end of the day, like, he struggled from literally everywhere. To me, I think it became a little bit mental too. So maybe it started with an illness, he was short of breath, all those things. And then it turned into like a mental struggle because now there's all this pressure on him. Everybody's talking about it. And he's just not able to deliver really in any way. Like, he struggled across the board, and it was very different from the previous year where he dealt with injuries, but when he was on the floor, he was dependable. So it's a little bit of a mystery. I don't know if we'll ever get more details around the health ailment that he had. I don't think that he necessarily knows. He's very open with the media. I don't think that he was sitting on something that he just didn't want to share. But it's possible that in 5 years we'll get the full story. You know, it's certainly an unfortunate ending to what was otherwise a pretty positive tenure. Like, I think a lot of the things about Porzingis were actually worked out pretty well. Like, I think he fit in great on the floor at times, in the locker room, fan favorite, obviously. And in 2024, like that game one, everybody's talking about it now, but I don't know where you are without it. So, you know, it's unfortunate that that's how it ended for sure. And clearly the fact that they weren't able to get any value back, like, just kind of goes to show you how much his value tanked around the league. The Hawks are taking a flyer on him. It's kind of a no risk situation. And honestly, the other possibilities that there was some better value they could get back, but that they wouldn't have really lost payroll. So they weren't going to trade for like a guy who was under contract for 3 more years who they weren't sure about. So we'll never know the entirety of all the packages that were out there. But this package gave them one major thing, and it brought them below the second apron in one swoop. But now they're going to be below the second apron for the rest of the offseason if they want to be, which means they can aggregate salaries. They have a lot of new things that they weren't able to do necessarily before that. Quick message from our friends over at PrizePicks, then I'll continue taking some questions. PrizePicks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join millions of users and sign up today. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite basketball players with players from baseball, hockey, esports, and much more. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this basketball season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports takes into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, so I'm seeing lots of good questions here through the chats. I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. I have a little bit of time here, and then I'm going to Maine for the weekend. So fingers crossed for me that there are no big Celtics transactions, because the last couple times that I've tried to leave my house, something big has happened. So I have some of my college basketball teammates here for the weekend, and we're going to hopefully not have any news break. So let's take a look here at what else. I see that I actually missed a lot of these questions. I think I talked about Niang and the fact that I think that they're probably actively shopping him around. I don't think there's anything specific that they wanted about him. Do we keep Simon? I would imagine he's in the same boat. Like, he is a positive asset on an expiring deal who can score in bunches and is young and healthy. And for a lot of teams, they might be a good scoring boost. So I actually do think that they will actively shop him around. Right now, top 2 guys in the roster that I think will get traded are those 2, because I don't think that the Celtics necessarily sought out after them. Like, this is not one of those deals where they went to go find Anthony Simons. Like, I think they wanted to go just make that move and get some positive contract back, and they did. Okay. Other questions here. I know some people are wondering about. So, okay, this is actually a good point. Michael said, honestly, the second apron penalties are a little bit overblown. They're not toothless. They're real and they're painful, but they're not as painful as gutting a championship level team. So I agree with this. I think that it's more about the luxury taxes than the actual basketball penalties, and that the second apron is just a good benchmark. Like, they saved nearly $500 million, or no, they slashed their payroll by half by getting rid of Porzingis and Holiday. I forget the exact amount. And so that's the big win there. There's no owner in the NBA is going to pay enormous luxury tax, second apron luxury tax, and not contend for a championship. So it's apparent to me that the Celtics don't think they can contend for a championship next season without Tatum. I don't know that I necessarily agree. Like, I think you could have built a roster, an expensive roster around Derek White and Jaylen Brown and those guys without Tatum and just see how that goes. But to be fair, like, they also were about to lose in the second round with Tatum, so I understand the front office's concern. One of the things that I'll just say, this is not really in relation to your question, but Brad Stevens made a really pointed comment on Wednesday night when he spoke after the draft. And he said that he watched the finals and he watched the Pacers and the Thunder, and that their pace, they were the two best teams in the league and they deserved to be there. And he talked about how against New York, the Celtics were walking the ball up sometimes. And it's apparent that in hindsight, they were a little bit frustrated with how the Celtics played and their slow pace. You're going to see them play stylistically a little bit different next year. And that's why I have some hope that they actually might surprise people, because I think the on-court changes, the stylistic changes based on the new personnel, or even just getting rid of, not having Tatum available, which is obviously unfortunate, not having Porzingis available, they might play at a faster pace just because Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, these are the guys that want to push the pace. So I'm curious how that's going to look. So it's a lot, so to go back to your point, Michael, it is a lot more about the repeater tax. It is about money. I do think there are real penalties. Like, you don't want your draft pick to move to the end of the first round, especially if you're not sure how good of a team you're going to be. That could be a lottery pick. Like, that's something you definitely don't want. The fact that you've been in the second apron for a few years makes those penalties even more severe. As far as just making offseason moves, the fact that you can't aggregate salaries, like, it's tough. Like, think about every trade that we've seen in the last few years. You're adding Marcus Smart and Danilo Gallinari. That's right. That's who it was, right? And Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams. Like, that's how these moves go. You wouldn't have been able to make either of those moves if you were a second apron team. So it's more that it's hard to team build when you're a second apron team. You can retain your players. And I think that if they had won the championship last year, there would be a lot of pressure to keep that core together. And if they disrupted that core, I think that they would have deserved all the flack in the world for doing that, for dismantling a championship team. Right now, they're not really dismantling a championship team because this year's team next year without Tatum was not going to be a championship team in their eyes. And we can debate that. And I'm sure most fans probably agree with that assessment. I think I maybe have a little bit more of an optimistic view, but that's the reality. Tom asks, do you think we need to make another cost-cutting move to bring Allen Luke back? Signing them right now would probably put them back over the second apron, which is true. I also don't know that either of those guys will accept completely veteran minimums, but we'll find that out on Monday. I think they're both worth more. So it's a question of, are they willing to take a pay cut because they like the Celtics and they like their families like it here? They both have kids. They both have wives. They're both pretty rooted here. So we'll see. But I would imagine if this team does not look like it's going to be competitive, that's going to make it even harder to convince those guys to take significant pay cuts. Like, it's not like you're taking a pay cut for a championship team. So I do think regardless, there's going to be another cost-cutting move in the next few days, which might mean that my main plans are screwed. Because now that I'm thinking about it, if Monday's free agency and they still need to make some space, it might be a little tough. There might be some moves coming here in the next few days, but it's also possible that they don't sign right away and that they are exploring the market for a little bit, and that we see if there's additional moves that are made to clear up that space so that they can sign. But I think that Simon is going to get flipped, Anthony Simons. And I know that some fans got excited about him. I think, honestly, fans were excited because there had been discussions around Jrue Holiday potentially losing value. Like, the Jrue Holiday trade was going to come with an attached asset. Instead, they get back a good player. And so I think that fans were excited about that. But my interpretation from the jump was that Simons is going to get flipped for something else. And we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they want to give him a chance, see if he can score, help this team a little bit. They're going to certainly need a little bit of help. They're going to be down a lot of points per game. So maybe they do keep him, but I think that they're going to evaluate his value around the league and see if there are any suitors, and see if they can offload a little bit of money, bring back Allen Luke, maybe even get a player that they think better fits their system. The big thing with him is that he's just not a great defender, and I just have not seen in a long time a non-defender succeed on the Celtics. So we'll see if he's an exception. Do you think there was urgency to get under the second apron so quick to allow for more teams to bid on JB and or Derek? No, that's not how it works. So, like, there was not that's not the kind of deal that they're now able to do that they weren't able to do. There are very few deals that I think are now available. I think the urgency was for other kinds of moves. And also, I think that I don't know if some of these options would have been available later in the offseason. So I was surprised, though, that there were no moves related to this year's draft. Like, I thought they might move up in this year's draft, maybe move down. Like, there was none of the action had anything to do with this year's draft. They ended up having the same first round pick that they were going to have, and then the second round moves had nothing to do with any other personnel changes. Any chance of Hauser surviving the salary cutting? I think absolutely. Hauser is a good basketball player. I think he fits in the Celtics system. He's not on an expensive deal. I know a lot of people feel that he is. He's making about $10 million a year. It's probably a little bit more than they would want him to be paying him, considering Luke and Al are going to be making less if they stay in Boston. But he's not really overpaid. And I think that he had a little bit of a down year last year. But the biggest thing for me is that he didn't get enough looks. And that's more of a reflection of the Celtics' stagnated offense sometimes. Again, he shot 40% from three again last year. There are very, very few players that I actually can go through the list and find these guys. There are very few players that have shot above 40% every season of their NBA career. Hauser has never shot below 40%. I've said this probably 1,000 times in these shows, so apologies for boring you guys. But they value him, right? They extended him because they value him. So they're not going to just salary dump him for nothing if they can't get value in return. And I think that they might value him more than other teams value him. And that's what it comes down to a lot of times, these transactions. Like, if the Celtics value Jaylen Brown more than his market value, they're going to keep him, that sort of thing. So Hauser's chances of being on the roster next year, again, these are guesses. Like, I don't want to say like I have a report here. 50%, I would say, there's a 50% chance that he will still be on the roster next year. Derek, this is not a question, but this is a good point. The second round picks, I don't think anybody was like super, super hyped yesterday when the Celtics traded down, because people wanted to see them draft somebody they knew at 32. But they get 4 second round picks for one. And Derek makes a good point. That KD deal included 5 second round picks. So these picks can be used to acquire talent. These picks have value in transactions around the league. And while right now I do anticipate that these will be late second rounders, you never know, right? Injuries happen, teams disappoint. Orlando Magic have a bright future, but you just never know. Okay. Jason asks makes a comment about Simons and Pritchard. I think Pritchard is just a better fit for this year's system. You guys all know I'm high on Pritchard, but this is really not my bias talking. This is, I think Pritchard is a better defender. And Simons is less efficient than him. And that might be a little bit of a shot selection issue in Portland. But if you look at Pritchard's shooting splits, he's a more efficient player as well. So again, it's hard to know, because Simons' efficiency went down a lot when Damian Lillard was traded. And so we're comparing apples to oranges here a little bit, because Pritchard has been able to play alongside a lot of talented players that have attracted a lot of the defense, but he also hasn't had as many opportunities. So we'll see. I don't really want to compare the two, because I don't think they're both going to be on the roster next year. But if he is, then we can certainly have that conversation. Tom asks who I'm most looking forward to watching in Summer League. I always want to see the youngest guys the newest guys the most, just because I'm not familiar with their game. So if Hugo Gonzalez is there, which Brad Stevens said he may or may not play, he's still currently playing his pro season, so he might take a little bit of a rest. I'm really looking forward to seeing him, because he's such a mystery right now, and it's hard to know how a guy who's playing in Spain is going to stack up against more familiar names from March Madness and NCAA. But also the other two guys, Amari Williams and Max Shulga, like, I don't know a lot about them. I'll be honest about that. So would love to see those two guys play. Glad that Jordan Walsh is playing. Glad that Baylor Shireman is playing. Some of the other guys have been kind of announcing on their own that they're going to be on the Summer League roster. We'll all have a full roundup soon. But those are the guys that I'm most looking forward to this year's draft class, because I'm just not familiar with them. I don't think that I'm going to be blown out of the water if Baylor Shireman dominates. I've seen Baylor Shireman dominate the G League. I've seen Baylor Shireman look really good in NBA minutes. So I don't really care how he plays in Summer League. So I'm not going to read into it too much, but I'm honestly not going to read too much about any of these guys, because history's already shown that these drafts can sometimes be a lot of different, these types of moves guys can play great in Summer League and be terrible later, or vice versa. So we'll see. Okay. Nikki asks, we're already under the second apron. It doesn't really matter if Simons and Yang are expiring or not. It does matter because they're more tradable contracts. That's my main point. So if they want somebody else back in return, or, if this is, again, like, they didn't go out and pick Simons and Yang as like their two guys that they want on the roster. Like, they might actually really not want one of them. I don't know. So my point is that there might be somebody else that is a better fit for this year's Celtics team. Even if it's not about salary shedding. So that's the big question here right now. Okay. I'm continuing to scroll here. I'm seeing a couple different takes. Some people are tired of the second round pick hoarding. I hear you. I understand. Prime here is responding to some of the questions around like why are they dismantling this team. I think this is kind of at the heart of it. Why would you pay for a team that just lost in the second round and also critically lost their star player for most, if not all? And I'm leaning all. Honestly, hearing Brad Stevens the other night, he did say he was, directly asked about Tatum. He said that Tatum is doing better. He's recovering. He's at the Auerbach Center all the time. He's making great progress, but that there is no timeline on his return and that there will be no timeline on his return. And I think that that's good for people to know that they're not going to rush him back. I've heard some people say, like, I really hope that they don't rush him back, and they're not going to rush him back. It's all about the long-term prognosis for him, and the franchise is not going to put any of that in doubt. Lloyd here, this is an interesting comment. Pritchard not performing well against elite teams is more of an indictment on the players around him. Everybody's standing around the 3-point line to wait for a pass for an open shot. I do think, like in Orlando, for example, where there was a couple of games where he was really taken out offensively, the offense was completely dismantled. So it wasn't like he specifically struggled. Again, you guys can go through his game log. He doesn't actually struggle more against good teams. When the team was fully healthy, he got fewer shots. Like that is the best pattern that I could find when I went through his game log. And so they were more often resting guys and having 3 guys out of the rotation against non-playoff teams than against playoff teams. So that is the biggest pattern that I could find. I'm not saying that he, obviously better defenses, more physicality, these are things that anybody would struggle with. And I think that being undersized, he deals with it more than others. Like Oklahoma City was a team that I felt like he actually struggled with their physicality and their defense and how their pickup points and everything. So we'll see how next year goes. Obviously, he's going to be on the top of most team scouting reports versus near the bottom, coming off of a 6th man of the year season, a career season, and then also they're going to be down 3 options that were. I mean, Jrue Holiday maybe wasn't above him on the scouting report on offense, but Porzingis and Tatum certainly were. So it's going to be a question mark how he performs next year. But I don't think that this. I think this narrative that he really struggles against good teams is somewhat overblown. And I've made this case a bunch of times. I know some people are not going to agree with me, and we'll see. We'll see how things shake up. But he didn't struggle in the playoffs. Like he really didn't. Other guys struggled a lot more than him. I think just the Celtics offense was super stagnant, and he didn't bail them out either. So you don't want to give him like too much credit, but he was pretty much par for the course with the rest of the team and the rest of his season. Like nothing really there stood out to me. And honestly, my biggest takeaway is that defensively, he really held his own through both of those series. So, okay, I'm about 18 minutes behind the chat. I'm reading the chat from 18 minutes ago. I'm going to start scrolling back. So, okay. I'm trying to decide which questions I should start with. Okay, I'm just going to say, I saw somebody tweet the Naz Reid thing. That was a fake account. We got to go get Naz Reid. That would be awesome, but I don't think that they're going to. I don't think they're going to be adding players right now for next season to try to win now. That's not the impression that I'm getting, but I did see the Naz Reid rumors or like tweets, but that was not from a real report. Tom here brings up an interesting point. If Tatum hadn't gotten hurt, we might have kept this team together, even the second penalty apron, penalties and tats. It's just like we will never know what this was going to look like if Tatum had been healthy and they had made a deep run and lost in the finals in 6 games to the Thunder, right? Like we don't know how this offseason would have transpired, but they have the easiest out to dismantle this team ever because it's probably the logical thing to do. So people are going to call the ownership of the new owners cheap. They're going to say private equity. You can say that. I'm not in the business of defending millionaire owners, but I will say I don't think we actually have reason to think that at this point because they haven't actually made any moves that are like if the Celtics had actually made a deep playoff run, Tatum's healthy, and then they make these 2 moves, I think we would look at them a little bit differently. But it's logical right now to think about the future. They're going to have to change their style of play. They're going to have to reshape the roster a little bit. Like this year's roster came up pretty significantly short, and then this injury changes everything. And I'm really curious to see how the Bucks and the Pacers are going to approach next year. The Pacers in particular, because Halliburton's really the hub of everything that they do. Not that Damian Lillard isn't, but we've already seen Milwaukee. It's Giannis, and I'm curious to see how those teams are going to approach their team building, their offseason. They're certainly not going to be second apron teams. That I'm almost certain about. Okay, where do I think the Celtics are going to finish the year in the standings? This is a good question because we don't actually know who's going to be on the roster yet. I'm going to guess that they are going to be a 6th or 5th seed team, which is probably people's nightmare, a lot of people's nightmare, because then you don't get a great draft pick, and then also you're probably not going to win the first round. But that's if I had to guess where they're going to land. They might try to be worse if they realize they're not doing well, but they have an inherently competitive group. If Jaylen Brown is healthy, if Derek White's healthy, if Peyton Pritchard's healthy, like I think that core is going to surprise people. Unfortunately for like the world, the 3 guys that I'm probably the most disproportionately high on the roster, besides like beyond like the average, you have to poll like my views on the players on the team versus the average person's. Those are the 3 guys that I have probably the most inflated view of: Peyton, Derek, and Jaylen. So that's why I have a little bit of a positive view of next year's team, because I imagine that all 3 of those guys will be on the roster. But maybe they'll totally disappoint me, and then I'll have to eat my words. But that's around where I think they're going to be. Feel free to put in the chat what you guys think. I'm curious. Just there are so many injuries. The East does feel pretty wide open. And again, this is a good point. If Indiana can make it to the finals, it does kind of not to dismiss Indiana at all, because I love their style of play. But at the end of the day, like that roster, if you would have looked at that roster on paper and said this roster is going to make the NBA finals. But if you find the right system for your guys, and I think that there's enough talent on this team still to, get the most out of it. And it's going to look different. It's not going to be all about mismatch hunting, everything like that. So we shall see. Michaela says, I'm not answering. What's your question? Is this the question? The tank? Sorry, I'm trying to scroll through these, but they're all, oh, okay. This one, do I really think Pritchard is a starting point guard? I do think that he can be a starting point guard. And I just kind of my previous point about why, I don't think he's actually struggled against elite teams. I think it's been more of a matter of just when everybody's available, he was usually one of the guys. Him and Derek were the 2 guys that a lot of times their shots were slashed. But hey, next year we'll see, because if he gets that opportunity, which I think right now is the plan, we'll get a really good sense. So that's my take. You guys feel free to disagree. I don't. At the end of the day, I'm just guessing. The front office is just guessing. The pundits are just guessing. That's the name of the game with basketball. Nobody really knows until he doesn't even really know, though I'm sure he certainly believes in himself. So Mason has an even more positive view than me. JB, White, Pritchard, Al. That's a 2 seed. Hey, I like the optimism. But I think that's, a lot would have to go wrong for other teams. We're talking about a fully healthy Cavs team, a fully healthy Knicks team. Those 2 teams are top 3 teams next year. So I think that those are still the top 2. Detroit's going to make a push. You never know what other injuries are going to pop up. So, we'll see. We'll see. Baylor going to probably have a bigger role this year. Baylor, again, I think he's 24 already and showed some really good flashes in March. So he's somebody that I think is going to play a little bit of a bigger role. What is he capable of? How can he hold up defensively? How much of a playmaker can he be? Like, honestly, Tatum being out opens the door a little bit for Baylor, because he can play a little bit of that like point forward role a little. Like, I think that him being a playmaker is a good thing for this team, and he probably wouldn't have had many opportunities with Tatum available. So also an open question. We'll see him in Summer League. We'll see him in the G League. He might be on my short list of guys that I'm a little bit higher on than the average person watching the Celtics. Any other pressing questions? And I'll end here things in a little bit. I know I missed some of the questions in the middle because I realized I was so behind the chat that I was no longer answering relevant questions. So if there are any pressing questions, throw them in the chat right now, and I'll do like 3 or 4 more questions. Do you think JD will be on the team next season? Leaning no. I think Sunday is when they can pick up or decline his team option. Leaning no, just because he really hasn't gotten many on-court opportunities in his 3 years. And so I think that if they believed in him as a long-term part of this team, they probably would have given him more of those opportunities. I also think they might get some young players back in any potential trades in the coming days here. So do they value those young guys more than JD? I don't know. So I'm tentatively leaning no, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's on the team. But he would have to be on the standard deal. He has a team option. And he cannot be a 2-way again. He can be a 2-way elsewhere, which I didn't realize. I thought you could only be a 2-way 3 times, but you can only be a 2-way 3 times on one team, and then you can go and be a 2-way elsewhere. So that might be what happens to him. Again, G League MVP last year, so I don't know how much more G League basketball he can tolerate. He might end up going overseas if he doesn't find a spot in the NBA. That's my guess. I haven't heard that specifically, but we'll see. Can we not tank next year? Listen, if you're asking me, I would say like try to build the best team around the guys that are available. I think Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, see what you can do with, and Tatum comes back in a year. But that's not usually how front offices operate. If they don't think they can put together a contender, they retool, they think about the future, getting money off the books. So like as somebody who covers the team, like, yeah, it'd be fun to see them be as good as possible next year. I think that it'd be fun for the players, it'd be fun for the fans. I don't think they're going to outright tank. I think they're going to try to field as competitive as a roster as possible, but without sacrificing future flexibility, which was Brad Stevens' big word, without getting in the luxury tax payroll too high and second apron. Right now, they're still a first apron team, so it's a balance of a number of things. But I don't think they're going to prioritize being competitive. And then Naeem here asks, do you think we keep Simons and Yang? I'm leaning against keeping both of those guys, but Simons is probably going to be more of a trade market for. So if one of them's on the roster next year, I think it'll be Niang. Sorry, Celtics fans, you're going to have to learn to like him and tolerate him a little bit. I will say, just I saw a lot of people leaving like really mean comments on his Instagram. Like the guy got traded, he didn't pick to be here. He's from Mass, he's from Lawrence, and yeah, he's had some skirmishes over the years, but like that's a pretty terrible welcome. So if you're leaving mean comments, I would suggest stop leaving mean comments on his Instagram in case he stays in Boston. Also, just in general, like he didn't choose to come here. He's probably bummed out that he got traded multiple times last year. Where he started in Cleveland, went to Atlanta. He's kind of bouncing around. That's the tough thing when you're on an expiring contract like that. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up here. I see there's some more questions. I'll do another one of these after the weekend. So I appreciate everybody for hopping on. As always, it's fun to answer your questions. It's fun. There's a lot to discuss right now. For so long, there was like nothing to talk about. But right now, there are 2 trades, 3 new rookies, 2 press conferences. You can check those press conferences out. Mike Zarren and Brad Stevens both addressed the media this week. Some interesting things they had to say about the future of the team. You can watch our draft content. And I will say, like, the number one thing that was really I really have enjoyed is having these young guys on the podcast. So check out Baylor Shireman, Jordan Walsh, Drew Peterson, Torrey Craig. We had some fun interviews, some fun Joe Mazzulla stories, some light content that's still a little bit of a nice break from all the, doom and gloom of kind of dismantling this team. So enjoy that content, enjoy the show, subscribe to You Got Boston Podcast, like this video, it really helps with the algorithm, share it with your friends. We'll do another live stream soon. Appreciate you all and enjoy the rest of your weekend.